We are back with another episode of videos I lose sleep over. And today we got a video on Tartaria. Welcome if it's your first time. I hope you're doing well wherever you are, whatever time it is. Let's jump right into the video.
Did you know that an entire empire has been erased from history? Once upon a time, you could open any map from the 1500s through to the 1800s and find a massive territory labeled Tartaria, or Grand Tartary. This was no little kingdom. We're talking about an empire that stretched from Eastern Europe across Asia. But suddenly Grand Tartary disappeared without a trace. What happened to the once magnificent civilization? Did they disappear naturally, or is there more to the sudden vanishing? We will find out together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. Before we dive into the conspiracy, let's start with the most undeniable evidence of all, the maps. Take a look at maps from the 1500s to 1800s. For over 3 centuries, European cartographers showed a vast region called Tartary.
Keep saying that there's no way we built some of the buildings that we have in the US in less than 200 years. If the Americas were so-called discovered in the 1700s, there's no way, or a little bit earlier, whatever it is, there's no way.
Or Grand Tartary. These weren't rough sketches or fantasy maps. One look and you'll see the empire dominating huge swaths of Asia. Spanning from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, and from Siberia down into Central Asia, some maps even show independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and Russian Tartary. This suggests not just one region, but multiple Tartarian territories. But here's the thing. How does a landmass this enormous just disappear? If you still wonder whether the empire did exist, you should see this. Different European nations' maps all show consistent descriptions of Tartarian territories. French maps, Dutch maps, German maps, you name it. They all agree on where Tartaria was located and how large it was. That's not the kind of consistency you'd expect if map makers were just making stories. But in the 1800s, Tartaria began to leave maps, not gradually, no, but suddenly, like someone decided that this empire should no longer exist on paper. The question is, how did this happen? Think about it. At first, there were hundreds of historical maps documenting this empire over 3 centuries, and then, nothing. Modern atlases contain no trace of it. Geography textbooks never mention it. It's as if an entire chapter of world history was torn out of the books. But if Tartaria was just a misunderstood term for scattered nomadic tribes, why would anyone bother to erase it so thoroughly? And more importantly, what happened to all those grand cities and territories that the maps clearly showed? The answer might be more shocking than you think. At around the time this empire was vanishing from maps, something extraordinary was happening across America and Europe. Suddenly, grand buildings began appearing everywhere, and we mean everywhere. Massive structures with intricate stonework and architectural details that would challenge modern engineers. Government buildings, train stations, exhibition halls, and even entire city centers. What's more, they were constructed with speed during the late 1800s to early 1900s. The big question is, who gave the engineers such advanced knowledge? Before we answer that, there's a problem.
I wonder if a lot of these buildings we could even build today to the level of detail, like especially the buildings with like intricate geometrical shapes and stained glass windows and like just like I said, the level of detail.
Timeline doesn't add up. In 1906, there was a devastating earthquake in San Francisco, but before anyone could tell what was happening, the city rebuilt itself with jaw-dropping structures, and they did so in a few years. Knowing the effects of such a major disaster, it should take years to recover from the aftermath. But somehow, they found the resources and skilled craftsmen to erect buildings that still marvel today's engineers. How did they achieve such a feat? Could it be that they received external help from Tartarians? If you're still in doubt, let's consider Chicago's World's Columbian Exposition in 1893. In the books, records say that this white city, which spans over 600 acres of elaborate neoclassical buildings, was designed and constructed in just 2 years. 2 years. Can you believe that? These are uniquely crafted buildings that would normally take skilled craftsmen decades to complete. The official explanation? These were temporary structures built with plaster and staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and fiber.
Anybody working in construction or any kind of like architectural person will tell you that you can't even work every day of the year to come up with these buildings. You have to like wait during summertime where like stuff just kind of sets a lot faster. You can't work in rain. Like there's times of the year where it's hard to make these buildings, and that's like a fact today.
But look at the photographs. Do these buildings look temporary to you? Of course not. These bear the mark of equipped engineers. But this is where it gets really suspicious. Shortly after the exposition ended, the incredible buildings were demolished, every single one of them. The reason given by the government? The buildings were only meant to be temporary. But think about it. If you invested huge amounts of money into erecting a building, would you just tear it down immediately? It makes no sense. Because of this irrational act, Tartarian theorists shook the world with the big question: what if they were trying to eliminate the last evidence of the Tartarian Empire? If you wonder about the origin of such suspicion, let's take a look at the theorists' proposal. Firstly, these buildings were not constructed for the exhibition fairs like we were made to believe. No. Instead, they already existed. Crazy, right? The thing is, from the 1500s to the 1800s, the Tartarians left a mark. Since they were an advanced civilization, the buildings they erected showed the same excellence. The Tartarian theorists proposed that the government never erected any temporary buildings for the fair. Instead, they renovated the already standing Tartarian structures, then destroyed them afterward. Now let's look at the architectural style itself. These buildings shared remarkably similar design elements no matter where they were built. The same classical columns, the same ornate domes, the same precise stonework. Whether you were looking at a building in Chicago, San Francisco, or St. Petersburg, Russia, they all looked similar. How do you explain that level of consistency across different nations, different construction crews, and different periods, unless they weren't built by different people at all? Still, you won't believe the next card played by Tartarian theorists. They proposed a staggering idea that the architectural evidence goes even deeper than the world's fairs. Perhaps the Tartarian Empire didn't just disappear, it was buried. A walk through any major city built before 1900, and you'll notice something strange. Buildings that appear to be sinking into the ground. First floors that have become basements. Windows that now sit at sidewalk level, looking up at passers-by like the eyes of buried giants. Tartaria theorists call this the evidence of the Great Mud Flood. What is the Great Mud Flood? You wonder. In the 1800s, a catastrophic event visited the land, taking many cities with it. This includes hundreds of Tartarian cities getting lost under layers of mud and debris. According to the Great Mud Flood theory, a massive geological disaster struck the planet, destroying the advanced Tartarian civilization and leaving only the upper floors of their buildings visible. But where is the evidence that this tragedy ever happened? Their response: the evidence is everywhere. In Seattle, entire blocks of buildings show their original ground floors buried beneath modern street level. The famous Seattle Underground isn't just a random tourist attraction, it's proof that the city was once built on a completely different ground level. And guess what? It's not just in Seattle. Enter New York City's subway system, which shows the same pattern. From time to time, construction workers keep uncovering such precise handiwork far beneath the modern city. While the government calls them tourist attractions and makes money off these architectural wonders, nobody bothers to question their origin. And a majority of origins point back to Grand Tartary. Remember the San Francisco earthquake we talked about earlier? It's the second piece of evidence. After the 1906 earthquake, reconstruction plans became the order of the day. But during the reconstruction process, the workers came across really interesting pieces. Instead of finding rubble after the natural disaster, what they found were intact design features, elaborate facades that had been buried for decades. Since this coincides with the period when the Tartarian Empire disappeared, historians wonder, did these architectural pieces come from Grand Tartary? As a counter, mainstream historians offer a simpler explanation for the Great Mud Flood. Their name for it: urban development. They argue that street levels naturally rise over time as new construction builds upon old foundations. Roads get paved and repaved, raising the ground level. Buildings get renovated, with new entrances built at the current street level. But is this really the case? Of course, Tartarian researchers argue this explanation doesn't fully account for their observations, especially since we're not talking about a few inches or even a few feet of gradual change. Entire floors appear to have been buried beneath the modern ground level. What could have caused this, if not the Great Mud Flood? And let's not forget the suspicious timing. Why would this phenomenon appear so consistently across the globe during the same historical period when Tartaria was disappearing from maps? Why would the buried architecture show such remarkable similarity in style and sophistication? The mud flood hypothesis suggests that this wasn't gradual urban development at all. It was the burial of evidence of a civilization that someone desperately wanted hidden beneath the earth. The theory gets more daring. It proposes that the world's fairs of the late 1800s and early 1900s weren't just normal celebrations. According to Tartaria theorists, they were cover-ups. Think about it. How do you hide an entire lost civilization? How do you explain away magnificent buildings that precede the official timeline? Simple. Claim you built them yourself, show them off to the world, and then destroy the evidence. The timeline alone is the biggest red flag. In 1893, the Chicago World's Fair covered 600 acres with over 200 buildings, including huge structures like the Manufactures and Liberal Arts Building. At the time, this was the largest building in the world. The official engineering records say that this entire complex was designed and constructed in just 24 months. But even modern-day engineers find such a swift timeline nearly impossible. Before you agree, let's break down what that would require. The Manufactures building alone covered 44 acres under a single roof. Its central hall could have fit the US Capitol, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Winchester Cathedral, Madison Square Garden.
Did we even have the manpower for all of that? That's what I wonder about. I don't even think we had the workforce to do that.
And St. Paul's Cathedral, all at the same time, with room to spare. Can you imagine that? The building featured intricate ironwork, complex glass exteriors, and structural details that would leave modern construction crews in awe. And we're supposed to believe this was all accomplished in less than 2 years using 1890s technology. and by workers who had never attempted anything remotely similar before. Doesn't it make you wonder too? The 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco presents an even more impossible timeline. Just 9 years after the devastating 1906 earthquake had reduced much of the city to rubble, San Francisco allegedly constructed an elaborate fairground. This fairground featured the magnificent Palace of Fine Arts and dozens of other engineering wonders. The official story tells us that these structures were built specifically for the exposition using temporary materials. But examine the photographs closely. Does this look like temporary architecture to you? It does not. But this is where they forgot to clear their tracks. Despite the scale and supposed temporary nature of these structures, very few detailed construction photographs exist. We have plenty of images of the finished buildings and their demolition, but remarkably little documentation of the actual construction process. Why is this so? If not because there wasn't any construction to document. If that made you stop in your tracks, this next Tartarian excellence will amaze you. Do you know star forts? They are unique geometric structures with precise angular shapes that appear in many places in the world. Europe, North America, and Asia, you name it. Tartaria researchers point to the mysterious star forts found across the globe. They suggest that the origin is Grand Tartary. Don't take a deep breath yet. While counter-historians classify them as military fortifications designed to withstand cannon fire, the other side says otherwise. One look at their geometric precision, and you'll notice that it doesn't fit the military explanation. The structures of the star forts follow mathematical principles that seem more suited to energy manipulation than defense. The angles, the proportions, the positioning. Everything about star forts screams they were designed according to principles of resonance and electromagnetic field manipulation. They weren't built to keep armies out. They were built to channel and focus energy. To make matters worse, there's the acoustic evidence. Step inside any great cathedral or government building from this era, and you'll immediately notice the incredible acoustic properties. Your voice carries in ways that seem almost supernatural.
I always wondered too, like when you look at the steeples, they always have like a gold, like the gold cross, or like it's just always gold at the top. And I know people talk about red bricks being able to hold the charge, and I just think about that. Like, why were the top of these buildings always gold, and a lot of them are found with red bricks?
You'll hear that the sounds resonate and amplify with such amazing accuracy. Tartaria theorists argue that these weren't designed for better church sermons or political speeches. They were built as massive resonance chambers, spaces designed to amplify sound frequencies for technological purposes. Here is where it makes sense. Recent research shows that certain frequencies can influence matter at the molecular level. Sound waves can levitate objects, break down materials, and even alter the properties of water and other substances. What if the Tartarians had mastered this technology centuries before we even understood the principles involved? The implications are staggering. Imagine a civilization that could power entire cities without burning fossil fuels, move massive stone blocks using sound frequencies, and even transmit energy and information across vast distances without any physical infrastructure. Feels like a virtual reality game, right? This explains how the Tartarians could construct such massive buildings so quickly and with such accuracy. It also explains the undeniable consistency of building styles across different continents, and it might explain why this civilization had to be erased from history. Because if free energy technology existed, if it was really possible to power the world without oil, coal, or nuclear fuel, that knowledge would threaten the entire foundation of the modern economic system. and no government would have liked that idea. And if the Tartarians possessed such advanced technology, what happened to it? And why don't we see any evidence of these energy systems in operation today? The answer might be more disturbing than the theory itself. But before we go into that, here's where the Tartarian mystery takes its most incredible turn. If this advanced civilization existed and built these massive structures using free energy technology, there's a burning question we need to ask. What did the Tartarians themselves look like? The answer is both simple and shocking. They were giants. Walk through any grand building constructed during the Tartarian era, and you'll immediately notice something odd about the proportions. Doorways that tower 12, 15, and even 20 feet high. Staircases with steps so large that normal-sized people have to stretch to climb them comfortably.
When you think about it, like, when you do go to like a cathedral or massive one of these buildings, the doors are usually really tall and super heavy. Like, really heavy, and I'm sure the doors have been swapped out over the years just to make them lighter. Imagine what it was like before, like probably dead bolted and everything.
Ceilings that are 3 times higher than what we see today. Who would use such towering designs if not giants? Mainstream historians try to explain this as grandeur for grandeur's sake. This is the idea that architects simply wanted to create impressive spaces that would awe visitors. But Tartaria theorists propose a different explanation. These buildings weren't designed to impress normal-sized humans. They were designed for inhabitants who were significantly taller. Consider the furniture depicted in photographs from the late 1800s. Chairs with seats positioned unusually high off the ground. Tables that seem oversized even for their grand surroundings. Beds that appear massive even by the standards of luxury accommodations. There is more evidence pointing to a gigantic race. The historical accounts speak for themselves. During the 1800s and early 1900s, newspapers across America regularly reported discoveries of giant skeletons, not just 1 or 2 isolated incidents.
I think it's noted too that before Christopher Columbus supposedly discovered the Americas, it was the Vikings, Leif Erikson. And when you think of Viking, you think of tall, red-haired people, but maybe they were wiped out by some people who were bigger and more equipped.
But dozens of documented findings. The Smithsonian Institution's records from this period mention numerous acquisitions of unusually large human remains found during construction projects, mining operations, and archaeological projects. Skeletons measuring 7, 8, and even 9 feet in height, with bone structure that suggested they belonged to a distinct race of humans. But here's where it gets suspicious. If you try to find any of these giant skeletons in museum collections today, you would be wasting your time. They've all vanished. According to Tartaria theorists, the Smithsonian and other institutions systematically removed these remains from public view, either destroying them or storing them in private collections where researchers can't access them. The big question is, why? We lack the answer too. The thing is, the cover-up theory extends beyond just hiding bones. Some researchers claim that historical photographs from the late 1800s were deliberately edited to make people appear normal-sized to match the buildings around them. It gets even more interesting. Cultural memory springs up piece of evidence. Nearly every ancient civilization has legends of giants, beings who were larger and more powerful than ordinary humans. Greek mythology speaks of titans. The Bible mentions Nephilim. Norse legends describe enormous warriors. Native American tribes across the continent have stories of giant races that once inhabited their lands. What if these weren't just myths and legends? What if they were cultural memories of actual encounters with a race of giant?
When they talk about like the Nephilim uh, sleeping with the woman of our humankind, it kind of makes sense when you think about like the anomalies of people who are like over 7 feet. It's kind of rare, but when you think about stuff like that, it does kind of make you wonder.
Humans, the Tartarians themselves. This would explain the large scale of Tartarian architecture. It would explain why these buildings seem designed for inhabitants much larger than ourselves. And it would provide yet another reason why evidence of this civilization had to be systematically erased from history. Acknowledging the existence of a race of giants would fundamentally challenge our understanding of human evolution and development. It would raise uncomfortable questions about what happened to these beings and why modern humans inherited their world. Everything you know about how you came to be would suddenly look false. But soon enough, another query rose to the surface. If the Tartarians were truly giants with advanced technology, how did they disappear so completely? And who had the power to erase all evidence of their existence from the historical record? The answer leads us to the darkest aspect of the Tartarian conspiracy: their disappearance. What we're talking about isn't just the disappearance of one civilization. According to Tartaria theorists, we're looking at evidence of the most massive historical cover-up in human history. Most likely a deliberate, coordinated effort to rewrite our entire understanding of the past. They call it the Great Reset. This is not the recent economic theory, but a much older and more sinister process of erasing inconvenient truths from the historical record. Consider the timing of major catastrophic events in the 1800s and early 1900s. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871, the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, World War I from 1914 to 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic, World War II. Mainstream historians see these as unrelated tragedies, natural disasters, conflicts, and diseases that shape the modern world. But Tartaria theorists propose something far more disturbing. These weren't random events. They were coordinated attacks designed to destroy evidence of the Tartarian civilization. Wait, what?
I kind of wonder, like, we think of world wars being fought over resources and religion, but maybe it's really being fought over knowledge. One who has the most knowledge usually has the upper hand.
Yes. They suggest that the Great Chicago Fire is particularly suspicious. Official records claim it started when Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern in her barn. But examine the destruction pattern, and you'll notice something odd. The fire specifically targeted the most elaborate and architecturally significant buildings in the city, while leaving simpler structures largely untouched. If this is true, then the cover-up may be more extensive than even Tartaria theorists realize. Tartaria might not be the only advanced civilization that's been erased from our history. However, the most compelling evidence comes from historical photography. Examine photographs of major cities taken in the late 1800s, and you'll notice something deeply unsettling. The streets are empty. We're not talking about light foot traffic or quiet neighborhoods. Look at the major metropolitan areas, New York, London, Paris, Berlin, that appear virtually abandoned. Wide boulevards stretch for blocks without a single person visible. Grand public squares sit completely vacant. Entire city centers look like elaborate movie sets waiting for actors to arrive. This is suspicious.
Almost like the person doing the photography was sent there to take pictures of stuff that they discovered rather than take pictures of the architectural advances.
Conventional explanation for this involves photographic technology. Early cameras required long exposure times, and moving people simply didn't register in the final image. But this explanation starts to break down when you consider the scale of what we're seeing. These aren't just streets with fewer people than expected. These are photographs of massive urban centers that appear to have been completely abandoned. Where are the carriages? Where are the street vendors? Where are the basic signs of urban life that you'd expect in any functioning city? The empty streets in historical photographs might indeed be explained by long exposure times, combined with the fact that 19th century urban centers were genuinely less crowded than modern cities. But acknowledging these conventional explanations doesn't mean we should dismiss every aspect of the Tartarian mystery. So again we ask, what happened to Grand Tartary? You tell us what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. If this story intrigued you, wait until you hear about Mu, the mother civilization said to be even older than Tartaria. Tap the video on screen and dive deeper. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again.
Alright, we'll have to check that one out. But thank you guys for coming to hang out. Hope that video sparked some questions in your head. And until we meet again, have a good one, guys.